Welcome to CivilNet. My guest is Judy Norsigian. She is the executive director and co-founder of Our Bodies, Ourselves. Judy, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Maria.
It was really fascinating and thrilling for me to read about your biography, first of all, to read about the things you've accomplished and done in your life, because your generation is what helped my generation to break free of the traditions and the perceptions of what a woman's role was in the family and in society. Oftentimes I would say, though, that it was the women's movement of the 60s that helped my generation, pursue our education, be more aware of who we were as human beings, as citizens, as women. Sometimes our roles were more difficult because as much as we changed, our husbands didn't change. So for me, that whole period of the 60s was a very romantic period in human history, not only in the United States. I think all over the world there were many sweeping changes taking place. And you were part of the feminist movement in the United States, in the Boston area. And you embarked on this most unbelievable journey of something that you're holding in your hand called, in Armenia, Menk Umer Marmine, or Our Bodies, Ourselves, which changed the narrative. It had a profound impact on American consciousness, on women's consciousness of their sexuality, of their body. Tell me how, when you look back in the late 60s or 1969 after this conference you attended with a group of women, how was it that you all came together and decided to be so progressive at a time when...
Well, you have to understand that back then the women's movement was just burgeoning across the world, not just in the United States. Many groups were opening up conversations about the workplace, discrimination in law, in medicine, in education. Our group, which started out as the Boston Women's Health Book Collective, was one of the pillars in the women's health movement, just a piece of the larger women's movement. But Our Bodies, Ourselves became iconic. In fact, it is one of the featured entries into the Makers, the website, and the big AOL and WGBH, PBS project in the United States now. Our Bodies, Ourselves was named by the U.S. Library of Congress as one of 88 books that shaped America, honored by Time magazine, and recognized in so many circles as a hugely important impetus to women organizing for change, particularly in health. But really, it's more important than just health. It's about women finding their voice, no matter where they're trying to have an impact. It's about changing the way we're socialized, not to speak up, not to say anything, and to recognize that injustice to anyone is an injustice to all. So we picked up on issues of race, class, gender discrimination, ageism, discrimination against people with disabilities, not just women. We recognize that all of these social justice issues were intertwined. And our group is one of the few women's organizations that survived. We're about to celebrate our 45th anniversary. At our 40th anniversary, which was at Boston University, we had a symposium and brought in about 15 of our global partners to present at a variety of panels. Our Armenian partner, Dr. Mary Khachikian, who is the founder of the Pan-Armenian Family Health Association, spoke rather eloquently about the work here. We feature her on a panel along with Dr. Renu Rajbandari from Nepal, our colleague, a journalist from Senegal, our colleagues in Israel and in Latin America, speaking about change, policy change and personal change. It's one of the reasons why I'm here. And
I must say, 45 years, when I was, you had on your website the original, because it didn't look like this in 1970 when you published it. It was on a typewriter, a handwritten cover, and it was stapled on newsprint. So I was looking at the PDF, and I was looking at some of the things that you had written in the book, or the booklet at the time. And the reasons why, and it's just incredible to me that just 45 years ago, the lack of knowledge that we had as women about our rights, our bodies, how doctors...
And it persists in many corners of the world. We have a global initiative that we didn't really start. Women's groups have come to us from around the world and said, please give us technical assistance so we can produce translation adaptations, booklets, books, electronic, digital versions. It's now in 33 different languages.
And 4.5 million copies sold. I mean,
around the world, but more important is not the copies sold, but the materials distributed for free to low-income women.
And 33 different languages.
Yes.
Obviously including Armenian.
Our website has a lot of these languages represented, there are excerpts, and the stories of these groups. In fact, at the AWA conference just recently, and I am on the board of AWA, as you know, we had our partner from Istanbul, Mavi Kalam, a woman named Gamze Karadag, came here, attended the conference because she got a travel grant from the Hrant Dink Foundation. And she had several meetings with Dr. Khachikian, and we're planning a Turkey-Armenia collaboration around women's health issues as a result of their meeting back in 2010 and continuing that cooperation. Many of the problems are similar across the world, some are different.
I think as women, as human beings, all of our stories are quite similar. It just depends wherever we were born and the situations under which we grow up. But as human beings, we all face the same challenges, don't we? And
I think in Armenia, one of the biggest challenges is the need for women's leadership development. It's why I'm personally donating my books to the American University of Armenia to start a large women's studies collection. It is my dream.
Your own library?
I have a very large library of hundreds of books, and I don't have room for them all. And I've started to give some to women's studies programs in the United States. And just a week before I came to Armenia, I decided most of these are now coming to Armenia. I'm making all my friends check a box of books every time they come, because I think that that's the beginning of women finding their voice, learning about the history of women's activism, women's empowerment, and then understanding what it is that you want to do here and now, going forward, whether it's in IT, it's in education, it's in law, it's in medicine. There are so many opportunities, but they must be picked up with a social justice perspective. I'm very excited to see the work of the Leadership School under Samvel Movsisyan. I'm very excited to see the work of some of the younger leaders here. And that's what some of the AWA leaders and I myself are very interested in supporting as we come back to Armenia time and time again to be of use here, to support the efforts here so that women can advance, can be more influential in politics, can be leaders in all sectors of society. This is critically important, and I'm optimistic about the future.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, the Armenian International Women's Association, if its objective is to bring together women from different professions, from different countries, to network, to be able to build those bridges of expertise and knowledge and communication. That way, the women in Armenia benefit. And when the women benefit, they become stronger, they become leaders, the country benefits, then the nation benefits. So.
And the other thing I want to say is that it's very important to understand that strengthening the role of women is not being against men.
Absolutely.
Most of the women in my organization, yes, they struggled with their husbands, who in the early days of the women's movement did no childcare, didn't help with cooking and cleaning. Many of them learned to change. By the way, these are families where there were two income earners. So why should women work outside the home and be the only ones working inside the home? But most of these husbands got the message and they participated. It was very exciting to see those changes within families. To this day in the United States, we do not support families. We do not have paid leave when you have a child. Most European countries do, of course. We do not support working women. We do not support working families. It's a travesty in a country as rich as the United States, but we're still working at it. We do not have childcare the way we need to have it in the United States. We're working at it. I think that
it's a long process, isn't it?
It's a very long process, but there are groups out there doing such important work here in Armenia as well. And those of us in the diaspora have to find these groups, these so-called civil society organizations. The most important groups are the NGOs who are trying. I'm talking about the NGOs who are really doing the right work.
Yeah, the ones who are working on the ground, the grassroots NGOs. If the diaspora finds the proper plugins to find the proper partnerships, and I guarantee there are the real valuable organizations who are doing amazing work today in Armenia, they need the support and expertise, sometimes financing from the diasporan organizations. they can start making a huge impact in Armenia.
Exactly. And that's why I hope that Iowa will come back, Iowa, however you pronounce it, and that we will have more meetings. We have great partners at YSU, at AUA. Some of the younger people I've met are particularly passionate about these issues. And going forward, I think we'll create more alliances and really empower women to be stronger in the society. It is about strengthening Armenian society, and that includes doing something about depopulation. When we look at the issue of sexually transmissible infections and doing something about that, what we're doing is stopping high rates of pelvic inflammatory disease, one of the major causes of infertility of women in this country. So when we promote condom use, this is not just about contraception, it's about preserving fertility. It's about preserving a woman's ability to give birth later in her life.
Right, so but these are things that we need to hear, that need to be articulated and presented in a way that's understandable to everybody that lives in Armenia. But I really want to talk about Our Bodies, Ourselves, the Armenian version. This is now available here in Armenia for Armenian women and men to read, yes?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But even more important, it's a free PDF file online. You do not have to have this print book. You can just go to our website, click on Armenian, Our Bodies, Ourselves, whatever, I forget exactly where it is at our website. The whole thing is there. It's about a 4 megabyte PDF file. I've been sending it to people as a PDF file. People can freely print, download,
read it online.
The copyright is not something that's restricted, so it can be read online. Pages can be printed out. It can be taken to rural communities. Dr. Khachikin has started several groups in places like Dilijan and other small, Vanadzor, other smaller towns and cities where young women have come together and have said, we need this information. Nobody tells us basic information about our bodies, our sexuality, our reproductive health. We must have this to preserve our health and well-being. And so these groups of women are forming and they are going forward.
Yeah, I think that it's the distinction needs to be made about women's health. I mean, why it's important to have a special emphasis because of our reproductive health, because it impacts not only society, it impacts our lives, how vulnerable we can be as women with our sexuality and with our reproductive health. And this is why we need to place importance. And I think that any kind of information that's available to women so that they know what they need when they go to see a medical professional, right? Which is why this whole initiative started in the first place in the United States with you guys, right? It was because you would go, 90% of OBGYNs were men who did not understand what a woman was going through, where a woman couldn't feel comfortable to talk about her issues, her sexuality, her reproductive issues. So, I mean, this is such an important contribution.
Actually, when we started, it was 98% of OBGYNs were men. It was 90% of all physicians were men. That has changed. It has switched totally. And many of our issues have changed. For example, in the United States, we're working to educate younger women about risks of so-called egg donation. This is mostly under the table. We don't have good data on long-term health effects. We have some disturbing studies that especially repeated egg donations can impair a young woman's fertility later. We need better data collection, and we're working with researchers at Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center trying to get this data collected. Around the world, young women are being solicited for their eggs, paid small amounts of money, but these young women are not informed about what we don't know and what we do know. There are some well-documented studies that show small but significant risks of something called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. We have 3 or 4 documented deaths from that problem. This is something that young women need to understand. These are not risk-free procedures. And the altruism that young women feel, they want to help infertile couples. We see that all over the world. And the money is good. It helps put you through school. But you should not be doing this at the expense of your own health. And we need better informed consent. We're working on that in the United States. And when we get that data, we're going to share it with folks here. Because it's a myth that we know enough about the risks of egg donation.
No, and here, you have, in one of your newsletters, I was looking about the issue of surrogacy and how vulnerable women in poorer areas of the countries of the world sometimes are being I don't want to say used, but who are becoming even more vulnerable because oftentimes they don't know about their rights. Sometimes they're not receiving proper medical attention. So all of this work that your organization does for the past 45 years is so invaluable, I think, to women, not only in the United States, around the world, and here, especially in Armenia, where we certainly need to be better informed of our rights.
Absolutely. It is all about information, empowerment, and working in groups, because as single individuals, we can only go so far. But in groups, we have strength. In numbers, we can get
Always.
a lot more
we need that critical mass.
Exactly.
Judy Norsigian, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with us and giving us, helping us to understand a little bit more about the work that you do and the importance of that work that you do. My pleasure. I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest was Judy Norsigian. She's the executive director and co-founder of Our Bodies, Ourselves. Stay with CivilNet.